educational technology equates with learning, which involves interaction, human-machine, and is good, whereas the traditional classroom equates with teaching, which involves lecture-style transmission from teacher to student, and is bad. I don't know how you feel about that dichotomy, which is put forward by the ed tech industry. It actually makes me feel quite cross. I would say my classrooms, and those of all the teachers I know, are truly interactive, i.e. between human and human, and not just between human and machine. So in writing the book, Interaction Online, Lindsay and I coined two terms: weak interaction, by which we mean human and machine, and strong interaction, by which we mean human and human. So human-to-human interaction is possible not just in classrooms, it's also possible via machine. So weak interaction is human to machine, machine back to human, but strong interaction on an online context is human to human via a machine. So this is what you normally kind of get for human to machine or weak interaction. You complete things and get ticks or stickers. What you usually get is things like drag and drop and matching exercises, similar to the kind of controlled practice activities you might do in classrooms. But tools that facilitate strong interaction, human-to-human interaction, like discussion forums and chat rooms, are often underused. And that's what I want to look at with you today. So I want to begin by looking at some interaction tools. How do you choose a particular interaction tool? And I'm not particularly talking about Zoom today, although Zoom could be one of those tools. I'm talking about all kinds of platforms like Edmodo and Facebook and Lefora, other platforms like that, where you can write as well as speak. So here are a number of questions that you can look at afterwards at your leisure. But for me, I think the most important are, how easy will it be for students to access the platform? It has to be easy, otherwise they get discouraged. How familiar are students with the platform already? It helps a lot if they know how to use it. Some of the trials we did were with Facebook. And whatever you think about Facebook, it was, most students were familiar with it, knew how to use it. So a lot of the instructional problems that we had with some other less familiar platforms did not exist because they were familiar with it already. Is it easy to find new and unread messages? On Edmodo, Facebook, certain other platforms, it's easy. Some platforms like Moodle, it's not so easy because they get kind of tucked away and hidden, and you actually have to open folders to find them. Is it easy to post messages to the group? That's quite important. And here is a crucial thing. Is it easy to post private messages to each other? You actually need a private message facility if you're going to do anything like information gap activities. You have to have a facility where you can post different information to different groups or different students. And finally, the other question I think is vital is it possible and easy to upload images and video? I think that's very, very important. I'll just try and move the screen over so you can see that. Oh no, that doesn't work. Okay, so designing interactive tasks. So interactive tasks, I think I can move these things over. Yes, so you can see a bit more clearly. You can see everything that's on the screen now, I think. So interactive tasks, as I define them, are between human and human. They can involve voice, as we're interacting now, or text. They can be synchronous, that is, we're doing a synchronous one now. You can hear me at the same time as I'm talking, or they can be asynchronous, something like Facebook or Edmodo, a platform like that. There should be a reason for communication in the task, to share information, opinions, values, or ideas. The task should have a purpose, and particularly online, and particularly with an asynchronous activity, they should have closure in an end point. That's so it comes to an end naturally. The communication should achieve something, for example, a solution to a puzzle, or the creation of a text, so that you know when the activities come to an end. It's particularly important if you're doing an asynchronous activity, so that it comes to a natural end and you don't have to step in and end it before it's finished. It should involve two-way participation. Members of the group should take account of others' contributions and they should contribute themselves. It should involve all members of the group. It should involve topics that are interesting and motivating, a range of interaction types, and a range of task types and learner task preferences. So going on from learner task preferences and types of task, Lindsay and I defined 5 types of interactive task. Factual tasks involve finding and sharing information on a factual topic, kind of tasks like quizzes or guessing games. Personal involve the kind of activities you're very used to, sharing personal information and talking about each other, anecdotes, preferences, values. Fanciful involves entering into an imaginary situation, sometimes by taking a role. So role play is one kind of fanciful interaction, and interacting to solve a puzzle or to share information. Critical is typically discussion or debate activities, exchange of opinions. And creative activities involve interaction to create a poem, a story, or another creative product. So I'm now going to take you through examples of the 5 types, and 2 or 3 times I'll open up the chat box and set you a little task so you can actually try out some of the activities and see what's involved. So first of all, we look at factual activities, and we'll begin with a very, very simple basic guessing game. So here's a picture. Look very carefully at the picture. Imagine I took this photo. Where in the world am I? You have to guess. You have a maximum of 25 questions to guess, and you can only ask yes or no questions. So you can't ask, are you in Europe or Africa? But you can ask, are you in Europe? So here are some examples of things you can ask. Are you east of, north of, west of? Is this a big city, a small town, a village? Is it a warm, cold, hot, dry place? Do they speak English, French, Spanish, Chinese there? So look very carefully at the picture. I'll open the chat and I want you to type some questions into the chat, and I will answer them. I won't type, but I will answer them orally. So here's the chat. So type your questions into the chat. Yes, that's a castle in the background. No, I'm not in Northern Africa, but you're quite close. It is in Europe. It is in Europe, yes. I am in Europe. I'm in Spain. It's not a hotel. I haven't heard of it as a vacation destination, but it's very near a vacation destination. It has a pretty hot climate all year round. It's in southern Spain. You're quite right. It's near Seville, but it's not Seville. It's not Granada. It's near Alicante. Okay, I'll tell you, because I think you've got the idea now. It's Aicha. Yes, how did you know? Have you been there? It's in fact where my co-author, Lindsay Canfield, lives in southern Spain. So that is Aicha. How did you know, Bill? Did you live there? Have you visited? Okay, so that's perhaps the simplest, very basic example of a factual activity, a guessing game. Here's a slightly more complicated one called sports shorts. So this is where a private message facility comes in. You message each person a sport. So imagine the messenger facility on Facebook, for example, or there's a similar one on Edmodo. I've messaged each person a sport. You have to write 3 rules for this sport. Don't say what the sport is, and write your 3 rules in a single post. Remember the language we studied for football rules? This is just imagining the classes doing something on rules and things like must and can't. So post your rules by, it's important if you're doing an asynchronous activity to give a date by which they must post. You have to keep quite a tight time frame and keep them to schedule. So the second task, task 2, is interaction. Read each other's rules and see if you can guess the sport. Choose 2 different posts from different people and guess the sport. Look at what other people wrote on your post and tell them if they guessed correctly. And the final task is creation. You're going to create a new sport. Choose 4 rules from different sports and make a new sport with these rules. Give your sport a name. So for example, you could have something like foot tennis, where the players kick the ball across the net. So that's appealing to sort of creativity as well as factual. So these 2 activities are examples of an interaction pattern I call confetti. Imagine somebody, the bridal couple come out of the church and everybody throws confetti at them. So you put up a simulus and everybody throws an answer out. So the first activity that we tried out, the guessing game, was a kind of the purest example of that. I put up something you had to guess and you all threw the answers at me. The sports shorts variation was slightly more complicated. So the teacher posts a stimulus, in this case to different students. The students reply by posting the rules. Then the students read and interact by guessing the rules. And then the final stage is students create. Okay, so that was 2 examples of factual activities, a guessing game, well, both guessing games actually, but one a slightly more complicated format, but still in the same interaction pattern of confetti. Okay, coming on now to personal interaction. Here are a couple of examples of personal interactions, still in the same confetti format. So here's one called Foodies. So the teacher begins by posting a photo of a dish or a drink or a meal that they had recently. And everybody has to post 1 question about the photo. And the teacher answers the questions. And here again, look, there's a deadline. You must post your question by Monday. You cannot repeat the same question, so pay attention to what the others have written. So everybody has to look at what other people have written before posting their question. Task 2 is interaction. Sorry, I'll just move this a little bit so that you can perhaps see. Yeah. A list of the questions you asked about my food picture. Here, I have corrected the language in some areas. Now, this is sort of feedback in the middle of a series of tasks. And the reason for giving feedback in the middle rather than right at the end of this series of activities is that the feedback will then help, the feedback and error correction will actually help for the rest of the task. So giving feedback and error correction in the middle of a series of activities is quite a good idea because it will help them in the rest of the task. And the rest of the task is for each student to post a picture of food. Something you ate, something you like or don't like, something you made. When you've posted a photo, look at the other photos and ask questions to at least 3 other people. If somebody asks a question about your photo, post an answer. And again, there's a deadline. You have until Friday. Okay. This is a very, very simple one called This or That. I'm going to write 2 things. You need to choose one you prefer. For example, traveling by bus or traveling by train. You write traveling by train or I prefer traveling by bus. You can also write neither. Okay. I'm not going to look at the chat at the moment, but if I said cats or dogs, what would you type? Okay, so this activity then goes on that the first person to post their 2 things, cats or dogs, the next person responds saying cats and then posts their 2 things. So they might say biscuits or cake or something like that. Okay, so it's a kind of a chain reaction. A student posts cats or dogs, the first person to reply saying cats, then posts the next question, cake or biscuits. And the first person to reply to that saying perhaps cake, then post something saying tea or coffee. Okay, so it's like a kind of chain reaction. And here's another chain reaction in the same sort of pattern. This is a fanciful activity. It's called almost superpower. And this is another one I think we'll do. In this activity, one person posts a superpower they'd like to have. For example, I can fly. The next person has to make a condition. You need to make it less powerful. Begin with the words, but you. For example, but you can only fly 1 meter off the ground. Then you add your own superpower in the same post. And then another person does the same. Continue until everyone has posted at least one superpower. I'm going to try this with you. As there's so many of us, far more than you would ever have in a class, it will be a bit more chaotic than it would be with 12 or 20 people in a class. You can, I'll talk about this just afterwards, you can rationalize it a bit by giving everybody a number, which I obviously can't do because I can't see you. So person 1 would reply and then post their own superpower. Person 2 would reply to person 1 and post their own superpower. Person 3 would reply to person 2 and post their own superpower. But that would actually impose order at the expense of everybody practicing language, because everybody would only get one turn. It would be less chaotic, but produce less language. Let's just try it, bearing in mind there are quite a lot of us. So I'm going to tell you a superpower, and you have to post a condition to the superpower beginning but you can, or but you, and post your own superpower. So 2 things, reply to mine, but you, and then post your own. So here's mine to start you off with. I can read people's thoughts. Just to repeat, I can read people's thoughts. So type, but you can only, but you can't understand the language, brilliant. But you can read them all the time. That is a real condition, actually. But you can't understand the language. But you can only do this for 1 minute at a time. Okay, remember to post your own superpower as well. Okay, but you can only read them if they're standing next to you. You can grow a moustache in a day. Great. Can anybody have a condition to that? Anybody provide, but you can only, but only on one side of your face. Oh, brilliant. That's lovely. But you have to shave it off the next day. Brilliant. Okay, another superpower somebody has said was Sean Allen says, but I can walk through walls. I can walk through walls, but only, but you can't come back again, but only if they're glass, but you can't walk back through. Brilliant. My superpower, I'm immune to viruses. That's a superpower I bet we wish we all had at the moment. But you can't walk through metal. Brilliant. Okay, I'll go back to, okay. So that interaction pattern I call pass the parcel. So it works like this. The teacher posts a stimulus, student 1 replies and posts the next stimulus. So student 1 replies, but you can only, and then posts the next stimulus. I can. Student 2 replies and posts the next stimulus, and student 3 replies, and so on. So it's a bit like kids at a party, passing the parcel. You take the wrapper off and then pass it on. Okay, another fanciful one is this murder mystery. This is much more complicated. We're kind of going up a step, both in language and in complexity of structure. So the ones we've looked at so far have been at a fairly elementary level. This is now practicing things like must have, might have, may have, can't have. And it's more complicated. So the teacher posts a scenario to everyone about the murder. Paul was found dead in his study. He'd been stabbed with a carving knife. He was found at 11 p.m. by his wife, and the time of the murder was 10:30. That evening, the Browns had 4 guests with them, their old friends Amy and John Jones, Marion's brother, Tom Crow, and a school friend of Marianne's, Marie Smith. So the scenario is for everybody, it's public, but the teacher has to post a numbered clue to everybody by private message. So nobody can see that numbered clue but the person it's posted to. So the clues are numbered, so the student with clue number 1 should begin by posting the clue, and everybody should write deductions and suggestions. So here's an example, which isn't from the particular story. The window was open. So student 1 posts clue 1, the window was open. Other students might post, the murderer might have got in through the window, or he might have come in through the door and left by the window. We tried quite a few of these activities out. We got teachers in Auckland and in different parts of the world to try them out for us. Our editor, Scott Thornbury, was very keen on particularly trying the more complex activities out. So one Auckland teacher tried out the murder mystery over, I think it took them about a week before it finally wrapped up. And there was one particularly delightful exchange. She did it in a private group on Facebook. It's not a public Facebook group, which means that nobody that she hasn't invited can actually look at what's happening. But I was invited, so I just sat in and eavesdropped. And I particularly liked this exchange. Student 1 posts clue 1, there were no fingerprints on the knife. So another student says, oh, then the murderer might have worn gloves. Or maybe the murderer was an alien who doesn't have fingerprints. I really like that little exchange. So I call this interaction pattern poker. So the students take numbered turns to post a stimulus and the others react. I'll see your, whatever, I don't know poker terminology, I'll raise you. Okay, so those were almost super murder mystery were 2 fanciful activities. If we look now at critical activities, which are the kind of stuff of discussions and debates, the kind of thing course books use quite a lot. Here's one called Yes But. And again, it's a complex activity involving creating an information gap by putting students in groups. So the challenge that the teacher posts is the advantages and disadvantages of solutions to climate change. The teacher has to provide some material for students to read. And she puts the students in 2 groups by private message. So you could use breakout rooms on Zoom, or do a private message to a group, divide the students into 2 groups and message one group that they are the advantages group and have to list all the advantages of these solutions, and group B are the disadvantages group, and they have to list all the disadvantages. And again, excuse me, again, there's a deadline. So in the groups, the students first of all interact in the 2 groups, in the advantages group and the disadvantages group. Then you regroup them in pairs, and again using a private message facility or breakout room. There's a pair, each pair has one who's been working in the advantages group and one who's working in the disadvantages group. So student A, advantages, begins. So for example, to halt climate change, we should plant more trees. Student B replies, beginning yes, but, and stating a disadvantage. Yes, but if we did that, we would. And student A replies again, yes, but. The person who can continue with the yes, buts the longest is the winner. So I call that breakout room, interaction pattern 4. They work in 2 closed groups, A and B, and then they regroup into pairs, an A and a B, for a follow-up task. A second activity for critical, create a constitution. This is a nice chaotic activity, which involves a lot of discussion. It says, this week you will read to check in to this forum regularly. Begin by posting a rule or law for, imagine a country. Okay, New Australia. It's illegal to have dogs. So task 2, you read each other's posts, read each other's laws and vote for any that you like. You can do that with a thumbs up button on Zoom if you're doing it on Zoom. If a law gets 3 votes, it's passed and becomes part of your country's constitution. You can discuss the laws, you can try to get votes, and you can pass other laws that undo previous laws. You see why it's quite chaotic. You have until February the 15th to post laws, comment, discuss, and vote. I call that interaction pattern 5, Postal Ballot. Students post, students then read and vote, and students have to then discuss and reach a consensus on the laws for their country. The final category of activities requires students or asks students to create some kind of poem or product, advert, it could be, or a story. So here's the first one, number plate story. I got fascinated in New Zealand because people have quite imaginative number plates. There's quite a big kind of license allowed as to what you have on your number plate. So the first stage, particularly for foreign students, would be to actually decode some of the number plates. So I did it is self-explanatory. Not old is self-explanatory, although it raises the question, how old was the person? Are they really old, or have they just retired and they're trying to pretend they're not old? What about the second one? Sorry, the third one. I'm going to open the chat again, and you type in any of the following, any of the, after I did it and not old, any of the ones that follow that, any that you can decode. Type in the actual English. Why be slow? Yes, that's right. Determined. Out of work. Any more? What about the one below, why be slow? Yes, I miss you. Baby, I owe you too. Yeah, there's a real story in that one, isn't there? Do you think it's a kind of revenge, a revenge drama? Baby, I owe you too. Okay. So once you've decoded the number plates and given them some examples, the fascinating thing about those number plates is you begin, like with baby, I owe you too, you begin to think, well, what was the story behind that? And so task 1, read this story about a number plate. It's actually in the book. I haven't, it's a bit long, so I haven't put it here. But the number plate was one extreme. And the story I created around that number plate was that Mario was a very poor street busker, and who got discovered by an impresario, and then finally did some training and became a famous opera singer. And he has that number plate, one extreme, to remind him how he went from one extreme to another. So the task is to choose a number plate from a number of examples that you think is interesting. What do you think is the story behind the plate? Why did they create the plate, and what happened in their life? And again, I'd like to share with you a student contribution. This is a young French guy in a colleague's class in Auckland. She tried out this activity in a computer lab, and this is what he posted. He chose the number plate was his. When he was young, Jack met a materialist girl named Maria. Despite all his true love, he did not have enough money to satisfy her. Then the cold-hearted girl left him to live a happy life with a richer man, breaking the heart of the poor young Jack. Emotionally perturbed by this breakup, don't you love that? Jack became obsessed by money and his revenge, so he worked very hard to earn as much money as possible in order to ruin Maria's husband and buy their belongings. Currently, Jack is laughing diabolically while driving his big black Maserati, decorated by a vanity plate where we can read, was his. I thought that was superb. So I call this interaction pattern writers group. The students create a story, a poem, an advert, etc. Students read, react, and comment. And the final activity I'm going to share with you is a collaborative story. Again, creative, but one, instead of doing it individually and commenting on other people's, the students are going to work together to produce this story. So the scenario is, let me just try and move our pictures. The Royal Hotel, it's a 200-year-old hotel. Many famous people have visited, and people say it has the best service in the world. It's also home to many dark secrets, and some believe that a ghost lives in the basement. So the students are going to write a story about the hotel together. Invent your character. You can be anybody. You can be a receptionist, a hotel guest. We did a trial on a Facebook writers group, and my husband Charlie was the ghost. He decided he'd be the hotel ghost. So you can be anybody. Just because one person has chosen a guest or a waitress doesn't mean that you can't as well. There can be several guests or several receptionists. You write in the third person, i.e. not I woke up and went downstairs, but Charles, so you need to give your character a name. You can't write for another person's character, but you can interact with one another in the story. Your first post should introduce your character into the storyline. They don't all have to start in the same place. If you, for example, one of you could start as a receptionist who's late for work, another could start as a guest waking up in her room. You'll eventually meet up. Don't post more than once in a row. And then you have to have a deadline for the story. And again, this is a somewhat chaotic activity, but it's huge fun. People interact in all sorts of interesting ways, and somehow, magically, some sort of storyline kind of develops out of it. I call that Creative Commons. Students are given the rules or a pattern for a collaborative poem or story and work together to produce the product. Okay, I've got about 5 or 10 minutes left. I'm just going to talk a little bit, first of all, about the ways in which online task design is different from classroom task design. So in the classroom, students work together in pairs or groups or mingle, and the interaction patterns are student to student or student to a mingle. Groups can't hear what other groups are saying, and information gaps are easy to set up. Online, students work in a whole class setting, and the interaction patterns can be very varied, as we've seen. I've just described 7, which are different from classroom interaction patterns. One big difference is that everyone can see what everyone else is saying, unless you've done a private message or a breakout room. Students can respond simultaneously, but still see what the other people are saying. Information gaps are more difficult to set up, but they can be done, as in the breakout room examples. But you do need a private message facility or closed group facility. I would say that's absolutely essential if you're doing anything interactive online. So some management considerations: some students may not take part or play a lesser role. This is true in a classroom setting. You all know students who are fairly passive in class. However, online, it's easier for the teacher to see who is not taking part. When you're in a whole class setting and you're wandering around monitoring groups, you may often completely miss the fact that somebody isn't taking part in one of the groups because your attention's on somebody else. It's easier to encourage them. It could be slow in starting, it could become sluggish. Again, it's easier to detect this than in a classroom situation if people are working in groups in your class, and the teacher can join in to get the discussion started again. Deadlines are important, otherwise it can drag on. So feedback and noticing. There's a significant difference here between classroom tasks and online tasks. In the classroom, the teacher monitors groups, but only hears random problems. There might be one group over there in the class that are having quite a serious problem, but your attention at the moment, you're taking notes on this group over here. But online, every contribution is visible. This is an invaluable opportunity to direct students' attention to opportunities for noticing and picking up on significant problems and misunderstandings, which may go unnoticed in the classroom. And if you think back to that, I think it was the foodies example, I included one where feedback and error correction was given in the middle before the second task. So you can pick up on any errors that have been happening in the first task, give feedback and correction, and that can then be a model for the second task. Okay, the final thing, I'll run through this fairly quickly because it's quite a lot to take on board, and it's probably better if you look at the recording and think about it more in your own time. But I'll just run through it very quickly so you've got a sort of outline of it. So this is a six-step checklist of questions in the order that you have to ask them and answer them if you're trying to design your own task for online interaction. So the first one, the first four or so apply to classroom activities as well as online activities. So these questions you'd have to ask yourself if you're designing an activity to use in class face-to-face with your students. So what kind of activity do you want to do? Do you want an activity designed around a topic? I mean, maybe your course book has something on climate change or holidays. Or do you want language practice? Maybe you want to teach a lexical set like furniture, a grammatical structure like the present perfect, or functional language like asking directions. So what do you need? What's useful for your students at this point? Choice 2 is which topic, what language, what level? So you have to consider what level your students are, what they've just learnt, what practice could benefit them. What do you think they'd like best, and what do you think they need most? Okay, again, this is something you have to ask yourself every time you design an activity face-to-face as well as online. So here, these are the 5 types of activity. Do you want to give your students a discussion task? Do you want a more conversational task based on personal information? Do you want to give a fantasy task and perhaps role play? Do you want a quiz, search or guessing game based on facts? Or do you want your students to create a product? What do you think they'd like? What would engage them? What are their preferences? Again, in the classroom, you need a stimulus. You need a question or a questionnaire, perhaps an image. But every interaction online will begin with some kind of stimulus. For example, an image, a question, a written text, a provocative statement, a puzzle, a challenge to do something. Okay, from now on, it begins to differ. The way you design tasks online begins to differ from face-to-face tasks. So the interaction patterns are actually quite different. So here is a little summary of the interaction patterns we went through just now in the talk: Confetti, Pass the Parcel, etc. So they're quite different from the interaction patterns in class, where you normally choose between pair work, group work, or mingles. The questions you need to ask about the interaction patterns: which ones will make them want to contribute? Does it involve interaction? Does it produce a significant number of interactions? And does it involve all students? And the final choice is staging and rubrics. Is your activity broken into small tasks? Have you checked students' understanding of how to interact? Are the tasks appropriate? Have you set a deadline for posting? Are your instructions clear and simple? Instructions should be written in short sentences, 1 step, 1 sentence. Have you adapted your language for the level? Have you given examples so they know what to do? Do your posts provide a model of what to do? Have you built in rules to ensure even interaction? And can you include positive feedback on a previous stage before introducing instructions for the next stage? Remember the example in Foodies with the error correction in the middle. Okay, I'm just going to do the acknowledgements. Then I'll give a short time for questions, and don't leave in the middle of the questions because there's one final activity to end with after the questions. So just to acknowledge, the book's called Interaction Online. It's Cambridge University Press, and it's by me and Lindsay Clantfield. And I'd like to acknowledge also the image sources, which are from Creative Commons. Some from Creative Commons, all other images are by pixabay.com. Okay, so now we'll have a little bit of time for questions, and then I'll have one final kind of farewell activity. So if I open Q&A, I'll answer your questions orally to save time. I don't want to type the answer. For Pass the Parcel, how many students in the group is the best size? I don't know. I've done it with about 12, 15. We've got something like 60 here. When I did this same talk for Cambridge, I had 270. So obviously it was far more chaotic. And as I said, you'd have to have a balance between order, running it kind of in an orderly fashion, where you name the students. So student 1 begins For example, if we take superpower, student one begins, I can walk through walls. Sorry, student one begins, to take my example, but you can only fly 1 meter off the ground. I can walk through walls. And student two then has to reply to that. But that limits the number of interactions and contributions each student can make. So I think it's always a toss-up between chaos, where students are throwing ideas out the whole time and using a lot of language, and a more orderly, less chaotic setup where they actually talk less. Will the PowerPoint slides be available for download after the event? Yes, I think they will. Are there any other questions? No other questions. Okay, I'll go on to the final. I'll go on now to the final activity, and this is just a farewell activity for us all to say goodbye to each other. I'll just close this. Here's an activity called Irish Blessings. Sorry, I'll just try and move this so you can see. Okay, so here are some Irish blessings. May you have bread, milk, a fire. May the wind be always at your back. May your roads lead downhill. I'm not so sure about that one. May your whiskey flask always be full. May your words become actions. May your words always come true. I also have a couple of doubts about those two. Is it necessarily a blessing? May the water you drink always taste sweet. May people smile when they meet you. And my absolute favourite, may you be surrounded by goldfinches. Okay, just to say goodbye to each other, I'd like you to, I'll open the chat box, and I'd like you to type in a blessing for the rest of the group, for their teaching life or for the rest of the week. Okay, I'll just open the chat and we can type in some blessings. May your Zoom never cut out, that's lovely. May you have a cat to purr in your lap. Oh, I love that. My Irish grandfather said, may your lessons be understood, great. May you grow as a human being. May you be in heaven, an hour before the devil knows you're dead. May you have a cat to purr in your lap. I love that one. May the traffic lights be green and the skies be blue. Beautiful. May your students be lively and motivated. May your salary always go up. Great, yes, I'm all for that one. May you watch a beautiful sunrise this week. May your days be cool. May you be safe all year. Great. Okay, well, may your students spend endless hours of fun in your classroom. I like that very much. Great. Delightful. May your fall semester be better than the spring semester. Lovely. Okay. Well, I'd like to say thank you all very much for coming, and I've really enjoyed being with you virtually, although I can't see any of you, but I've enjoyed your participation and reading your comments in the chat. And may you have a wonderful teaching semester and teaching life.
Thank you so very much, Jill. This has been really good. And I, for one, am really glad that this is being recorded, because I need to watch again, because I missed so many really good ideas. So thank you very much for agreeing to that. And I look forward to watching it back once more. And there was one more question just before we go about your email address or getting in touch with you afterwards. Is that an option?
I get so many emails. I'm not kind of terribly good. Perhaps, I don't know, if maybe people could go through Jalt.
Oh, that's good. Yes, yes, we can definitely do that. Yes, yes. If you have questions after this, please get in touch with me, and I'll forward those on to Jill afterwards. Yes, good idea. Nice. Well done. Are there any other questions Phil, do you have any others that you can see on your many, many monitors and such?
Not that I see in the participants, and on the
Okay.
Facebook Live, I don't see anything either.
Oh, okay, okay, good, good. Well then, just leaves us to say thank you. And many, many people in the chat are saying the very same thing. Thank you very much. Really, really lovely seminar. Thanks for sharing your time with us this evening. So
Lovely. Thank you.
And and I hope you find goldfinches and a cat to purr in your lap and all those lovely things.
Just take a screenshot. That's nice. Great. No, that's lovely.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much for coming. And thanks to all of you for joining and participating and such throughout as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Thank you.
No, I leave. Leave? Yes. Leave meeting.
All right.
There we go. Right.
Get out of here.
Okay. Bye.
All right, thanks everyone for joining. There will be a follow-up email with my email address if you have any general questions. And then, of course, if you have any questions for Jill, we can forward over to her later on. So thank you for joining. And please look out for our next webinar.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for your time today. And look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye. Thanks again, Phil, for everything as well.
No worries. It's always a lot of fun. All right. Let's see. I still got some people still sticking around.
Right. Good. Oh.
Please do check out the Facebook Tokyo Jolt group page on Facebook to see our next presentations and workshops that are happening. And you can always comment there and ask any questions, and the lovely Jolt Tokyo team will be able to help you out in any way they can. Check out Jolt Tokyo. I should be promoting my own chapter.
All the Tokyo Jolt chapters, or all the Jolt chapters going on.
I suppose.
Yeah, all the Jolt chapters.
I think Niigata, we're staying put. Actually, I think half of our exec team is actually in other different groups, so we're kind of busy on other things.
Very busy, it sounds like.
Yes.
Oh, good.
So.
Oh, good.
All right. A few more people still here.
Yeah. If you want, we can turn off the streaming and such.
Yeah, let me turn that off.
If you can.